Hi there. Tonight, we journey back to ancient Greece. Not to the bustling agora or the serene philosophical schools, but into the quiet, often unseen corners of daily life. Specifically, what it was like to exist as a male concubine. Imagine the warm, heavy air of an Athenian summer night, a faint scent of olive oil lamps mingling with something sweeter, perhaps jasmine. As you walk through a narrow, cobbled street, the sounds of distant revelry might drift to your ears, laughter and lyre music, but for you, such joys are often just background noise. You move with a purpose, perhaps carrying a small amphora of wine, your steps measured and silent, as if not to disturb the very stones beneath your feet. You're acutely aware of every shadow, every unexpected sound, because your life isn't quite your own. And let's be honest, you probably wouldn't survive a single week in this existence without experiencing some rather profound culture shock. This isn't a tale of heroes or philosophers. It's a whisper from the fringes, a look at a life that history often overlooks, tucked away in the scrolls and pottery fragments. It's a reality far removed from the idealized images of Greek democracy and intellectual pursuits. You find yourself, perhaps by circumstance, perhaps by sale, thrust into a position of profound vulnerability and dependence. This isn't a role chosen, but rather one imposed. Your existence is defined by service, by the whims of another, and by a societal structure that offers you little to no protection. It's a peculiar twist of fate, isn't it? To be in a society famed for its advancements, yet to be utterly without agency. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're feeling up to it, drop your location and local time in the comments below. It's always fascinating to see where everyone is drifting off from now. Dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You might be arriving at your new dwelling, a substantial house, perhaps even a sprawling estate, a stark contrast to any modest home you might have known. The air inside is cooler, richer, carrying the subtle sense of expensive incense and well-prepared food. Your eyes, still adjusting to the dim light of the internal courtyard, catch glimpses of murals depicting mythical scenes, perhaps a grand symposium, or a hero performing some impossible feat. It's all very grand, very important, and you're just part of the furniture, or at least, that's how it feels. Historians still argue whether the term concubine fully captures the diverse realities of enslaved or subservient individuals in ancient Greek households, especially for males. The lines were often blurred between enslaved persons, paid servants, and those in more intimate roles. But what is clear is that your status here is low, far below that of a free citizen. You are, in essence, property. This isn't a relationship of equals. It's one of profound power imbalance. One of the quirks of ancient Greek society, you'll soon discover, is its rather fluid definition of love and relationships, especially among men. But even within that fluidity, your particular role is firmly on the less desirable end of the spectrum. You are not a citizen. You are not a respected eromenos in a pedagogical sense. You are a tool for pleasure, a living ornament. You might even find yourself wishing you were just a simple house slave scrubbing floors, as at least that role often came with a clearer, albeit still harsh, definition of duties and expectations. The ambiguity of your position can, in some ways, be even more unsettling. Your first impressions are quickly followed by a dizzying series of adjustments. The sheer scale of the household can be overwhelming. You move through corridors that seem to twist and turn, leading to various wings dedicated to specific functions. The men's quarters, the women's quarters rarely seen by you, kitchens that hum with activity, storerooms heavy with the scent of dried herbs and grains, and the sprawling courtyards where much of daily life unfolds. You are just one more shadow. In this grand theatre, there are so many faces, so many roles, and you must learn them all, not out of curiosity, but out of necessity for survival. You might find yourself initially assigned to general household duties, a kind of probationary period where your strengths and weaknesses are subtly assessed. Perhaps you are tasked with grinding grain in a sun-baked courtyard, the rhythmic scrape of stone on stone, a monotonous soundtrack to your thoughts. Or maybe you find yourself drawing water from the well, the heavy amphora testing your youthful strength, splashing cool relief onto your calloused hands. This initial period is a test, a silent evaluation of your temperament, your obedience, and your physical capabilities. There's no formal induction, no employee handbook. You learn by watching, by listening, and by the sharp, unspoken corrections of the older servants. It's a very hands-on, or rather, hands-off, unless you, mess, up kind of training. One mainstream historical fact to grasp quickly is the pervasive presence of slavery in ancient Greek society. It wasn't an anomaly. It was the backbone of their economy and daily life. You, by virtue of your status, are now part of this vast system. While you might not be working in the brutal silver mines of Lorien, your existence is still defined by ownership. A peculiar tidbit about household slaves is that some, particularly those in more intimate or specialized roles, might have been granted small allowances or even taught specific skills like playing a lyre or basic arithmetic, not out of benevolence, but to enhance their value or usefulness to the patron. Think of it as ancient upskilling, though without the LinkedIn endorsements. Historians still argue whether the concept of household in ancient Greece truly reflected a single, cohesive unit, given the disparate statuses and roles of its inhabitants. Was it a family, a business, or something in between? For you, it's a cage, albeit one that sometimes comes with better food than you might have otherwise known. You're learning to navigate the subtle hierarchies among the enslaved population itself. There are the older, more trusted household managers, often also enslaved, who wield significant, if delegated, power. Then there are the specialized artisans, the cooks, the cleaners, and the general laborers. You find your place somewhere among them, often at the bottom, marked by your newness and your assigned, often ambiguous, role. You quickly learn to read faces, to interpret the slightest shift in tone. A lifted eyebrow from a senior servant might mean you're doing something wrong. A sharp word from the kitchen overseer means speed up. Your survival, quite literally, depends on your ability to anticipate needs and avoid drawing negative attention. It's a bit like playing a silent high-stakes game of charades, where the stakes are your comfort, your food, and ultimately, your well-being. And you're not allowed to ask for hints. The days stretch out, each one a repetition of tasks, punctuated by moments of quiet observation. You notice the way sunlight filters through the peristyle columns at certain times of day, illuminating dust motes dancing in the stillness. You hear the distant bleating of goats, the incessant chirping of cicadas, and the murmur of conversations you're not meant to understand. Your new home, despite its grandeur, often feels like a stage where you are merely a prop, silent and still until called upon. You might even catch yourself wondering if the statues in the courtyard have more freedom of expression than you do. It's a thought you quickly dismiss, of course, because such thoughts are not useful, and usefulness is your only currency now. Your days, you quickly discover, are not your own. They are a carefully orchestrated series of duties, each one designed to serve the needs and desires of your patron and his household. There's a rhythm to it, a slow, steady drumbeat of tasks that fills the hours from dawn until dusk. You might rise before the sun, the air still cool and crisp, to help prepare for the day. This could involve fetching water, tending to the small household shrine, or even helping to lay out your patrons' clothing for the day. It's a far cry from the leisurely mornings you might have once imagined for yourself. The household is a hive of activity, and you are but one worker bee. You might spend hours in the andron, the men's quarters, cleaning and tidying, ensuring everything is in its proper place. This could involve sweeping floors, arranging cushions on the dining couches, or polishing the bronze implements used for symposia. It's meticulous work, demanding attention to detail, because any oversight could lead to a stern word, or worse. You learn to move silently, efficiently, a ghost in the background, observing without being seen, listening without being heard. A mainstream historical fact about ancient Greek households is that they were largely self-sufficient units, producing much of what they consumed. This meant a constant stream of chores for everyone, free or enslaved. A quirky tidbit you might notice is the sheer number of oil lamps. Maintaining them, filling them, and trimming their wicks is a surprisingly time-consuming task, ensuring the house is adequately lit after the sun sets. It's a bit like being a professional candlelighter, but with more steps and less ceremony. Historians still argue whether the division of labor within Greek households was strictly gendered, or if practicality often overrode traditional roles, especially for enslaved individuals. For you, the tasks are assigned based on immediate need and your perceived capabilities, not necessarily on what might be considered masculine work in a free citizen's world. You might find yourself assisting in the kitchen, grinding spices, or preparing simple meals, even if cooking was often considered a female domain. It's all about utility, after all. Your afternoons might involve running errands outside the house, a rare chance to see the bustling streets, though you're always accompanied or given strict instructions on where to go and when to return. You might carry messages, purchase specific items from the agora, or deliver goods to another household. These excursions are a double-edged sword, a brief taste of the outside world, but also a constant reminder of your lack of freedom, as you are always under scrutiny, always on a leash, so to speak. You learn to blend in, to be unremarkable, to avoid drawing any unnecessary attention to yourself. After all, the last thing you want is for someone to notice you and then, heaven forbid, talk to you. That would just be awkward. Evenings bring a different set of duties. If your patron hosts a symposium, you might be involved in serving wine, preparing food, or entertaining guests with music or conversation, if you possess such skills. This is where your role becomes particularly pronounced. You are there to cater to every whim, to anticipate every need, to ensure the patron and his guests are comfortable and well served. It's a performance, in a way, one where your own desires and feelings are irrelevant. You learn to smile on command, to nod at jokes you don't understand, and to maintain an air of polite deference, even when you're utterly exhausted. It's a masterclass in emotional suppression, really. And as the night deepens, and the household finally settles into a quiet hum, you might find yourself preparing your patron for sleep, or perhaps attending to his more intimate needs. This is the part of your daily routine that is most private, most vulnerable, and most defining of your particular role. It's a time when the boundaries between servant and concubine blur completely, leaving you with little to no personal space or autonomy. You are always on call, always available, always serving. It's a demanding schedule, one that leaves little room for personal reflection, let alone a good night's sleep. Learning the household's rules isn't a matter of reading a scroll. It's a constant, immersive education in the unspoken. You arrive with no handbook, no orientation session. Instead, you're thrust into a complex social ecosystem where every glance, every gesture, every subtle shift in tone carries meaning. It's like being dropped into a foreign country where no one speaks your language, and you must decipher the entire culture purely through observation. And the stakes are considerably higher than just ordering the wrong kind of wine. The first rule you internalize, often through sharp, non-verbal correction, is silence. Your voice is not your own to command, at least not freely. You speak when spoken to, and even then, your responses are expected to be brief, respectful, and entirely devoid of personal opinion or complaint. Imagine trying to navigate your entire day with only nods, gestures, and the occasional murmured, "Yes, master." It's an exercise in extreme self-control, particularly if you were once accustomed to more freedom of expression. You learn to listen, with a heightened sense, to anticipate questions before they're even fully formed, and to have the expected answers ready on your tongue. Or rather, not on your tongue at all, but rather ready in your subservient posture, a mainstream historical. Fact is that personal honor and reputation were paramount in ancient Greek society, particularly for free citizens. For you, an enslaved male concubine, the concept of honor is entirely inverted. Your honor lies in your absolute obedience and discretion, not in your personal achievements or public standing. A quirky tidbit you might notice is the significance placed on the cleanliness of hands and feet. Patrons often had water brought for guests to wash before meals, and as a servant, you'd better ensure your own hands are spotless, not just for hygiene, but as a subtle sign of respect and diligence. It's a very particular kind of fastidiousness, almost ritualistic. Historians still argue whether the apparent lack of detailed legal codes, specifically addressing the treatment of enslaved persons, implies a societal indifference, or if it simply reflects an understanding that slaves were chattel, falling under property law. For you, this academic debate is moot. The reality is simple. You have no rights. Your body, your time, your very existence are subject to the will of your patron. Any kindness you receive is a gift, not a right, and can be withdrawn at any moment. This understanding permeates every interaction, every task. It's the invisible chain that binds you tighter than any physical restraint. You learn to read the moods of the house, particularly those of your patron. Is he jovial today, or brooding? Has he had a good night's sleep, or is he irritable? Your actions, your very demeanor, must adapt to these shifting atmospheric pressures. It's like living in a constant state of predicting the weather. Only the weather can decide whether you get to eat well tonight, or spend the evening in discomfort. You become a master of subtle cues, a silent barometer of the household's emotional climate. You learn to make yourself scarce when tension is high, and to be present and attentive when your patron is feeling expansive. You also quickly grasp the hierarchy among the enslaved population itself. There are those who have been in the household for years, perhaps even generations, who hold positions of relative authority. They know the ropes, they understand the patron's quirks, and they can make your life either easier or far more difficult. Learning to navigate these internal politics, earning the tacit approval of the older, more established slaves, is crucial. You don't want to step on any toes, metaphorical or otherwise, because the last thing you need is animosity from within your only real community. It's a bit like joining a very exclusive, very silent club where the initiation involves a lot of passive observation and absolutely no complaining. Your social standing, or rather, your distinct lack thereof, becomes painfully clear almost immediately. In ancient Greece, particularly in a city like Athens, citizenship was everything. It granted rights, protections, and a voice in public life. You, as an enslaved male concubine, possess none of these. You exist outside the neatly defined categories of free men, women, and children. You are, in essence, a non-person in the eyes of the law, a piece of property belonging to your patron. Imagine living in a society where your very humanity is, for all practical purposes, negotiable. It's a rather chilling thought, isn't it? You quickly understand that your value is purely instrumental. You are valued for your beauty, your docility, your ability to provide pleasure or service, not for your intellect, your character, or your aspirations. Any natural talents you possess might be exploited for your patron's entertainment, but they will never elevate your status. It's a bit like being a particularly decorative vase, admired, perhaps, but ultimately just an object to be used and displayed. And unlike a vase, you also have feelings, which is just great for you. A mainstream historical fact is that free Greek citizens often looked down upon manual labor and tasks associated with enslaved persons, considering them undignified. Your particular role, involving intimate service, carries an even greater stigma. While certain forms of male-and-male relationships were accepted, those involving an adult-free citizen and a subservient, often enslaved, younger male were viewed very differently from the idealized pedagogical relationships between older mentors and younger free boys. A quirky tidbit is that in some Greek city-states, there were laws or strong social conventions against free citizens engaging in certain types of sexual acts, if it placed them in a submissive role, as this was seen as compromising their freedom. An honor. For you, such concerns are entirely irrelevant. Historians still argue whether the perceived acceptance of certain same-sex practices in ancient Greece was truly egalitarian, or if it always maintained a strict power dynamic based on age and social status. For you, there's no debate. The power dynamic is stark and absolute. Your youth and physical appeal are your only assets, and they are perishable. As you age, or as your patron's tastes change, your precarious position could easily vanish, leaving you even more vulnerable than before. This constant awareness of your transient value adds another layer of anxiety to your already stressful existence. You're always on the clock, in a way, counting down to an uncertain future. You see the free citizens, even the poorer ones, move with an air of self-possession, a quiet confidence born of their rights and place in society. They walk the streets with purpose, engage in lively debates in the agora, and participate in civic life. You, on the other hand, move through the world largely unseen, a background figure, a shadow. When you accompany your patron, you are a mere extension of his will, a silent appendage. You learn to make yourself invisible, to avoid eye contact, to blend into the scenery. It's a survival mechanism, a way to minimize risk in a world that offers you no protection. Even other enslaved people might view your specific role with a mixture of pity and disdain. While all slaves share the burden of forced labor and lack of freedom, your intimate duties can isolate you further, setting you apart even from your fellow sufferers. There's a particular loneliness to your position, a sense of being perpetually exposed yet profoundly isolated. You are a commodity, bought and sold, used and discarded, without recourse or recognition. It's not exactly the kind of thing you can discuss over a pleasant dinner, even if you were allowed to sit at the table. Interactions with other servants in the household are a complex dance of unspoken rules and subtle hierarchies. You're not entirely alone, but you're certainly not among equals. The household staff forms its own micro-society with its own pecking order, its own gossip, and its own unspoken alliances. Navigating this internal landscape is almost as critical as understanding your patron's whims, because these are the people you spend most of your waking hours with. They can either be a source of quiet camaraderie or a subtle threat. You quickly learn who holds influence among the servants, the head cook, perhaps, or the older domestic manager who has been with the family for decades. These individuals often have the patron's ear and can, inadvertently or deliberately, make your life easier or harder. It's like being the new kid at a school where all the cliques are already established, and everyone communicates via telepathy. You observe, you listen, and you try to figure out which unspoken rules apply to whom, and how you fit in, or rather, how you don't. A mainstream historical fact is that large Greek households often had specialized enslaved labor, from cooks and weavers to tutors and nurses. This created a diverse internal community. A quirky tidbit is that some enslaved individuals were highly skilled and took immense pride in their craft. Even if their labor wasn't freely given, you might encounter an enslaved artisan who meticulously carves intricate details into wooden furniture, finding a small measure of dignity in their skill. It's a quiet rebellion, perhaps, against their circumstances. Historians still argue whether the concept of community could truly apply to enslaved populations, given the constant threat of sale and separation, while you form bonds of necessity. Even affection with some of your fellow servants, there's always an underlying tension. Anyone can be sold at any time, severing connections without warning. This makes deep attachments a risky proposition, a luxury you can barely afford. It's a bit like being on a ship where you know any of your fellow passengers could be thrown overboard at any moment, and you can do nothing to stop it. Makes for rather stilted conversation, doesn't it? You find yourself gravitating towards those who seem less judgmental, perhaps other, younger enslaved men who share a similar predicament, though their specific duties might differ. There's a silent understanding among those who share vulnerability, a quiet empathy that transcends words. You might share furtive glances of shared weariness, or exchange a quick, knowing look when the patron is particularly demanding. These small, fleeting moments of connection are precious, a reminder that you are not entirely alone in your isolated world. However, you also learn to be wary. Some servants might be quick to curry favor with the patron by reporting perceived transgressions or minor missteps. Others might resent your specific role, viewing it as less arduous or somehow more privileged, even though you know the hidden costs. You learn to guard your words, to keep your thoughts to yourself, and to maintain a polite, neutral demeanor with everyone. It's a constant tightrope walk, balancing the need for connection with the imperative for self-preservation. you can trust few and reveal even less. It's not exactly the kind of open, trusting environment that fosters deep friendships. More like a very intense, very quiet game of keep your secrets to yourself. The patron's expectations. This is where the real education begins, and it's a curriculum that shifts with the wind. Your patron is the sun around which your world revolves. His moods dictate the atmosphere of the household. His desires shape your duties, and his whims can alter your immediate future. Learning to read him, to anticipate his needs before he even vocalizes them, becomes your paramount skill. It's a bit like being a mind reader, but with far higher stakes if you get it wrong. And unfortunately, they didn't have academies in ancient Greece. You observe him constantly, surreptitiously. How does he take his wine? Does he prefer silence or music during his meals? What kind of conversations does he enjoy with his guests? Does he like his sandals brought immediately upon waking, or does he prefer to stretch first? These tiny details, seemingly insignificant, are crucial. Getting them right might earn you a fleeting nod of approval. Getting them wrong could result in a sharp rebuke, a punitive task, or even more severe consequences. You are constantly walking on eggshells, trying to divine the exact size and shape of the next one to avoid crushing it. A mainstream historical fact is that wealthy Greek men often held symposia, drinking parties that were also forums for philosophical discussion, poetry, and entertainment. Your patron likely hosts these, and your role during them is central. A quirky tidbit is that the Greeks had specific types of wine for different occasions, often diluted with water, and the strength of the dilution could even be a topic of debate or a sign of the host's generosity or stinginess. You, of course, are responsible for serving the correctly diluted wine, a task requiring a surprisingly keen eye and memory. Imagine the horror of serving undiluted wine at a symposium. Chaos. Probably, historians still argue whether the apparent permissiveness towards certain behaviors in symposia truly reflected a relaxation of social norms, or if it was a carefully controlled environment designed to reinforce social hierarchies. For you, the lines are drawn very clearly. You are there to facilitate the relaxation and indulgence of others, not to participate in it. You are the invisible hand, the silent server, the living entertainment that must never overshadow the main act. Your presence is functional, your personality is irrelevant, and any personal reaction is strictly forbidden. It's a very one-sided performance, where only one person gets to enjoy themselves. Your patron's moods can swing dramatically. One moment he might be expansive and jovial, regaling guests with stories, perhaps even offering a rare, unexpected kindness. The next, he might be brooding, easily angered by a perceived slight, or simply lost in thought. You learn to recognize the subtle shifts in his voice, the tightening of his jaw, the way he holds his body. These are your early warning signals. When the storm clouds gather, you make yourself even more invisible, quieter, more efficient. When the sun shines, you are perhaps a little more present, a little more responsive, but always within the bounds of your subservient role. Beyond the daily service, there are the more intimate expectations. Your role as a concubine means you are expected to provide sexual gratification whenever it is desired. This is perhaps the most vulnerable aspect of your existence, where your body is explicitly not your own. There is no concept of consent for you. Your availability is assumed, your compliance demanded. This is a cold, hard truth of your reality, one that underpins every other interaction. It's not a partnership, it's an imposition. You simply exist to fulfill this function among all the others. This aspect of your life is rarely discussed openly, even within the household, adding to the isolation and burden you carry. Your clothing and appearance are not matters of personal choice. They are dictated entirely by your role within the household. You don't get to wake up and ponder what vibes you're feeling for the day. Instead, your attire is a uniform, a visual, the marker of your status. It's typically simple, unadorned, and made of practical, inexpensive fabrics like rough wool or linen. Forget elaborate dyes or intricate patterns. Those are for free citizens, for those who can afford to express individuality. Your clothing serves one purpose: to identify you as a servant, unobtrusive and ready for labor. You might be provided with a basic tunic, perhaps belted at the waist, and simple sandals. There's no wardrobe to choose from, no fashion statement to make. The colors are likely subdued natural, undyed hues of beige, off-white, or muted browns. This simplicity is deliberate. It ensures you blend into the background, never drawing attention away from the patron or his esteemed guests. It's almost like being part of the set dressing, a living prop in the drama of daily life. And heaven forbid you get a stain on your tunic. That would be a whole dramatic scene of its own. A mainstream historical fact is that clothing in ancient Greece, for both men and women, was generally draped rather than cut and sewn in complex ways. Tunics and cloaks were common. A quirky tidbit is that while free citizens might oil their bodies and use strigils to scrape off dirt and sweat, you, as a concubine, might be expected to maintain a certain level of personal cleanliness, not just for hygiene, but also for your patron's aesthetic pleasure. This could involve careful bathing, perhaps even the use of simple perfumes if your patron desires it, though these are for his benefit, not yours. It's a pragmatic approach to personal grooming, focused purely on presentation. Historians still argue whether the simplicity of ancient Greek clothing reflected a preference for natural forms or was simply a result of the limitations of textile technology and dyeing processes. For you, the reason is purely economic and social. Expensive, colorful dyes were a luxury, a symbol of wealth and status that you do not possess. Your clothes are designed for utility and to underscore your subservient position. They are a constant, visible reminder of where you stand, or rather, where you kneel. In the societal hierarchy, your physical appearance beyond clothing is also meticulously managed, though not by your own volition. Your patron might have preferences regarding your hair length, perhaps requesting it be kept short or neatly styled. He might even dictate the presence or absence of facial hair. Your body is, in a very real sense, a part of his property, to be sculpted and presented according to his taste. There's no room for personal expression here, no chance to try out a daring new hairstyle or a particularly dashing beard. Your aesthetic choices are, shall we say, curated for you. You learn to keep yourself clean, even if the means are basic. While not every household would have grand bathing facilities, you'd be expected to wash regularly, particularly if you are in a role that involves close contact with your patron. This isn't about personal comfort or self-care. It's about maintaining your utility and appeal. The lack of personal adornment, the simple fabrics, the carefully managed hygiene, all combine to create an appearance that is simultaneously discreet and available. You are meant to be appealing, but subtly so, never ostentatious. It's a delicate balance, much like trying to find a perfectly neutral expression when you're secretly screaming inside. Food and living quarters. These fundamental aspects of life, which most free individuals take for granted, are for you entirely at the discretion of your patron. Your meals are typically simple, wholesome, and certainly not lavish. You'll eat what is provided when it is provided, and usually with the other enslaved members of the household. This isn't a fine dining experience. It's sustenance, designed to keep you healthy enough to perform your duties. Think of it as the original meal prep service, but without the annoying Instagram influencers. Your diet would likely consist of staples like barley bread, olives, figs, and perhaps a small amount of cheese or dried fish. Meat would be a rare treat, probably only consumed during festivals or when there were leftovers from the patron's more extravagant meals. Vegetables would depend on the season and the household's garden. Wine, usually watered down, might be part of your daily ration. It's a diet that emphasizes practicality and cost efficiency over culinary delight. You eat to live, not to savor. A mainstream historical fact is that the ancient Greek diet was largely Mediterranean, heavy on grains, olives, and grapes, with meat being less common than in many modern diets. A quirky tidbit is that Greeks often ate 2 main meals a day, a light breakfast and a more substantial dinner. You, however, might find your mealtimes are irregular, dictated by the needs of the household. Perhaps you eat quickly in the kitchen between tasks, or later than everyone else after your patron has finished his own meal. It's dining on demand, but the demand isn't yours. Historians still argue whether the quality of life for enslaved people varied significantly depending on the master's temperament and wealth, or if a baseline of deprivation was universal. For you, the experience is certainly not one of abundance. While you might not starve, you are acutely aware that your meals are a handout, not an entitlement. There's a subtle but constant reminder of your dependence in every morsel you consume. You eat with a quiet efficiency, never complaining, never demanding more. As for your living quarters, they are far from luxurious. You'll likely share a small, unadorned room with several other enslaved men, possibly located in a less desirable part of the house, perhaps near the kitchens or storerooms, or even in a detached outbuilding. Privacy is a foreign concept. Your bed might be a simple straw mattress on the floor, or a low wooden cot covered with a rough blanket. There are no personal touches, no cherished possessions to adorn your space. It's purely functional, a place to rest your weary body before the next day of labor begins. The room would be sparsely furnished, perhaps with a shared chest for meat belongings, but certainly no personal items of sentimental value. The air might be stuffy, especially in summer, and cold in winter. Light would come from a small, high window, or perhaps just the doorway. The sounds of the household would penetrate your sleeping space, the creaks of the house, the murmur of distant voices, the rustle of rats in the walls. It's a space of bare necessity, offering little comfort or respite. You learn to sleep soundly despite the discomfort, for sleep is a precious escape, however fleeting. It's not exactly the kind of room you'd see in a travel brochure, unless the brochure was titled Authentic Ancient Greek Hardship. Education and entertainment, for you, are not avenues for personal growth or leisure, but rather extensions of your utility to your patron. Any learning you acquire, any skill you develop, is strictly at his whim and for his benefit. You don't get to choose your curriculum. Your patron does, based on what he believes enhances your value as a concubine or servant. It's a very practical form of schooling. where the only graduation ceremony is your continued usefulness. Perhaps your patron enjoys music. In that case, you might be taught to play a simple lyre or to sing, your voice trained to accompany the revelry of symposia. Or maybe he appreciates literature, and you find yourself tasked with memorizing lines of Homeric epic to recite during quiet evenings. This isn't about intellectual stimulation for you, it's about providing an agreeable atmosphere for him. You become a living library, a personal concert hall, all designed to cater to his cultivated tastes. It's like being a walking, talking, highly trained entertainment system, but without the convenient off switch. A mainstream historical fact is that literacy rates in ancient Greece, while higher than many contemporary societies, were still not universal, especially among enslaved populations. Education, particularly formal education, was largely reserved for free citizens. A quirky tidbit is that some enslaved individuals were incredibly erudite, serving as scribes, accountants, or even tutors for their patrons' children. These were often highly valued slaves, sometimes even earning enough to buy their freedom. However, your specific role as a concubine might not offer the same path to intellectual development, as your primary function is different. Historians still argue whether the concept of cultural capital applied to enslaved individuals, meaning if their intellectual or artistic skills could truly elevate their social standing beyond their basic status as property. For you, the answer is nuanced. While your talents might earn you better treatment, perhaps even a slightly easier life than a common laborer, they do not fundamentally change your legal status. You are still enslaved, still dependent, and still vulnerable. Your beautiful singing voice might charm a room, but it won't buy your freedom. It's a cruel irony, isn't it? To be capable of such beauty, yet to be utterly unfree, even when you are not actively performing or learning. Your entertainment is often passive. You might be present during philosophical discussions at symposia, hearing snippets of profound thought, but you are not permitted to engage, to offer an opinion, or to ask a question. You are a silent observer, a vessel into which knowledge flows, but from which no reciprocal current is expected. It's like being in the front row of a fascinating lecture, but your mouth is glued shut. Your leisure time, if you even have any, would be minimal and unstructured. There are no holidays for you in the sense that free citizens might enjoy them. Perhaps a quiet hour at the end of a long day before sleep, where you might engage in simple, solitary activities, mending your tunic, or perhaps just staring blankly at the ceiling, allowing your mind to drift. Any genuine entertainment comes from within. Quiet observation, small acts of defiance in your thoughts, or the fleeting, stolen moments of peace. There are no board games with your fellow servants, no leisurely strolls in the garden. Your life is work, punctuated by moments of quiet endurance. Your personal freedoms are not merely limited, they are virtually non-existent. Imagine waking up each day knowing that every decision, from where you can walk to what you can say, is subject to the unspoken, or sometimes very explicit, control of another. You are not just confined to the household, you are confined to a life predetermined by your patron. It's like living inside a very beautifully decorated cage, where the bars are invisible but undeniably present. You cannot leave the household without permission, and even then, your movements are likely monitored. If you were sent on an errand, you are given strict instructions on your route and expected time of return. There's no spontaneous detour to the marketplace to gaze at the exotic fruits, no lingering by the harbor to watch the ships come in. Your world shrinks to the confines of your patron's property and the few designated paths you are allowed to traverse under supervision. It's a bit like being a very sophisticated drone, but without the fun of flying. A mainstream historical fact is that enslaved people in ancient Greece were legally considered property and could be bought, sold, or inherited. This meant their movement was entirely controlled by their owners. A quirky tidbit is that some masters would brand or tattoo their slaves, particularly those who had attempted to escape, making their status unequivocally clear to anyone who saw them. While this might not be your reality, the underlying principle of ownership permeates every aspect of your restricted existence. Historians still argue whether the perceived mildness of Athenian slavery compared to other ancient systems truly offered greater freedoms to the enslaved, or if it was merely a rhetorical distinction. For you, the difference is negligible. You are not free. You cannot choose your work, your companions, or your future. Your body is not your own. Your very ability to move, to speak, to exist in public space is contingent on your patron's will. This lack of autonomy is a constant, suffocating presence, a weight on your chest that never quite lifts. Even within the household, your freedoms are curtailed. You cannot simply walk into any room. Certain areas, particularly the women's quarters, are strictly off limits. You cannot engage in conversations with guests unless specifically addressed. You cannot express opinions, preferences, or desires. Your world is one of constant self-censorship, where every potential action is filtered through the question, will this displease my patron? It's an exhausting mental exercise, a continuous negotiation with an invisible rulebook that seems to rewrite itself daily. Your ability to form relationships is also severely restricted. While you might develop a quiet bond with some fellow servants, any deep attachment is fraught with peril, given the constant threat of separation. Love, friendship, genuine connection. These are luxuries that free citizens can pursue, but for you, they are dangerous aspirations. You learn to live in a state of emotional guardedness, protecting what little remains of your inner self from a world that seeks to exploit every part of you. It's a life lived under constant supervision, a quiet existence where even your thoughts sometimes feel like they're being watched. The threat of punishment hangs over your head like a perpetually stormy cloud, a constant, chilling reminder of your precarious position. In ancient Greece, as an enslaved person, you possess no legal standing to defend yourself against mistreatment. Your patron has absolute authority over you, and while extreme cruelty might be frowned upon by society in some areas, there are no formal legal protections preventing it. It's a rather terrifying thought, isn't it? That your well-being, your very bodily integrity, depends solely on the caprice of one individual. Any transgression, real or perceived, can lead to consequences. A broken amphora, a forgotten instruction, a slight misstep in demeanor. Any of these could result in a beating, a period of starvation, or being assigned particularly arduous or humiliating tasks. You learn to move with meticulous care, to speak with extreme caution, and to anticipate potential problems before they arise. It's like living in a perpetual state of dodge the falling anvil, where the anvil is invisible until it's too late. And ancient Greek anvils were probably quite heavy. A mainstream historical fact is that various forms of corporal punishment, including flogging, were common methods of disciplining enslaved people throughout the ancient world. A quirky tidbit is that while some philosophical schools debated the morality of slavery, these discussions rarely translated into widespread legal reforms or protections for the enslaved. It seems talking about it was one thing, but actually, Doing something about it was quite another. Perhaps they just ran out of parchment. Historians still argue whether the presence of public opinion, however limited, offered any indirect protection to enslaved individuals from truly egregious abuse, or if such opinions were merely for show among the elite. For you, the reality is stark. If your patron decides to punish you, there is no one to whom you can appeal, no court that will hear your case. You are entirely at his mercy. This vulnerability breeds a deep, pervasive fear, a constant anxiety that gnaws at the edges of your consciousness. You learn to suppress your natural reactions, to appear stoic, to endure in silence, because any show of pain or defiance might only exacerbate your predicament. The fear isn't just of physical pain, it's also the fear of humiliation. Public shaming, being forced to wear degrading symbols, or being subjected to public ridicule could be just as damaging, if not more so, than a physical beating. Your dignity, already eroded by your status, could be stripped away entirely. This fear of public disgrace makes you even more cautious in your movements and interactions, ensuring you never draw unwanted attention, never give anyone an excuse to target you. You might witness other servants being punished, a chilling spectacle that serves as a stark warning. The sounds, the shouts, the aftermath, these imprints reinforce the fragility of your own existence. You learn from their mistakes, adjusting your own behavior to avoid similar fates. It's a grim lesson learned not through words, but through the visceral experience of observing suffering. You become a master of self-preservation, a silent survivor in a world where the rules are harsh and the consequences are immediate. Economic dependence. This isn't just about not having money. It's about having absolutely no independent means of support, no way to earn a livelihood outside of your patron's household. Every scrap of food you eat, every piece of clothing you wear, every roof over your head is provided by him. You own nothing, possess nothing, and therefore you control nothing. It's a very simple equation: no patron, no existence. And unless you've got a secret stash of gold drachmas under your straw mattress, which, let's be honest, you don't, you're stuck. You cannot work for wages. You cannot sell goods in the market. You cannot accumulate wealth, even if a free citizen were to offer you a coin for a small service. Accepting it could be seen as an act of theft from your patron, as your labor and any fruits of it belong entirely to him. Your entire economic universe is confined to the patron's generosity, which is usually calibrated to keep you just healthy enough to be useful, but never wealthy enough to entertain thoughts of independence. A mainstream historical fact is that enslaved people in ancient Greece were considered part of their owner's movable property, akin to livestock or tools. Their labor and any potential earnings belonged to the master. A quirky tidbit is that some masters would allow trusted slaves to manage businesses or engage in trade on their behalf, sometimes even allowing them to keep a small portion of the profits, a system known as However, this was a privilege, not a right, and rarely extended to those in your specific role, which was more about intimate service than entrepreneurial endeavors. Historians still argue whether the potential for peculium offered a genuine path to freedom for a significant number of enslaved people, or if it was more of an exception that proved the rule of absolute economic dependence. For you, such possibilities seem distant, almost mythical. Your days are structured around personal service, leaving little opportunity for independent economic activity. Your focus is on the immediate, on fulfilling your duties to ensure your continued sustenance. There's no budgeting, no saving, no investing for your future. Your future is dictated by someone else's balance sheet. This economic dependence strips you of agency in every aspect of your life. Want a new tunic? You must wait for your patron to provide it. Feeling unwell? Your ability to receive medical care depends on whether he deems you worth the expense. Every need, every desire must be filtered through his willingness to provide. This creates a constant low-level anxiety, a subtle fear that permeates your daily existence. What if he decides you are no longer useful? What if he falls on hard times? Your fate is inextricably linked to his, but without any of the benefits of a partnership. Even the concept of gifts from your patron is fraught with this dependence. A gift isn't truly yours. It's a temporary loan, something that can be repossessed or held over your head. It reinforces his power and your lack of ownership. There's no true personal wealth, no nest egg for a rainy day. Every day is a rainy day when you have nothing to your name. This total economic subjugation ensures that your life remains entirely tethered to the will of another, a very heavy chain indeed. Your relationships with the family are, to put it mildly, complicated. You are an outsider looking in, a permanent fixture in the household, yet never truly part of the kinship structure. The patron's wife, his legitimate children, even his extended relatives, they are the true family, bound by blood and law. You are merely an appendage, a utility, and your presence, especially in your particular role, can often be a source of discomfort, resentment, or quiet disdain for others. Within the family unit, it's like being invited to a very exclusive, very awkward family dinner where you're serving the food, but definitely not eating it. You might interact with the patron's wife, though sparingly and usually in a formal capacity. Her authority within the oikos or household is significant, especially concerning domestic affairs and the management of other female slaves. Her gaze upon you might range from indifferent to overtly hostile, depending on her temperament and how she views your intimate relationship with her husband. You learn to be extra circumspect in her presence, to avoid any action that could be perceived as disrespectful or provocative. Her displeasure could lead to a very uncomfortable existence for you. A mainstream historical fact is that in ancient Greece, marriage was primarily a civic and economic arrangement, focused on the production of legitimate heirs and the transfer of property. The wife's role was largely confined to the domestic sphere. A quirky tidbit is that in some households, the wife might even have managed her own personal retinue of enslaved individuals, separate from her husband's. This meant navigating multiple internal power structures, often conflicting, could be part of your daily reality. Imagine having two bosses, neither of whom really likes the other's employees. Historians still argue whether the presence of concubines, both male and female, within the household was openly acknowledged or more of a don't ask, don't tell situation, particularly with the legitimate wife. For you, the tension is palpable. While your role might be an open secret, it doesn't mean it's accepted with warmth. You exist in a liminal space, visible but unacknowledged as a legitimate family member. You are always aware that you are a reminder of something less than ideal, an awkward truth that everyone pretends isn't quite there. The patron's children, particularly the older sons, present another layer of complexity. They are the future masters of the household, and their interactions with you can range from youthful curiosity to entitled cruelty. You must always show them deference, even if they are younger than you. You are their father's property, and, by extension, you are at their disposal to learning to manage these interactions without overstepping boundaries. without appearing too familiar or too distant, is a delicate art. One false move, one perceived disrespect, and you could face consequences not just from the son, but from the patron himself. It's like living with a group of mini-tyrants, each with their own unpredictable moods and sense of entitlement. Your primary duty is to the patron, and any interactions with his family are filtered through that lens. You are not there to be a friend, a confidant, or a surrogate family member. You are there to serve. This constant emotional distance, this inherent otherness, reinforces your isolation. You might witness family moments, laughter, arguments, shared meals from a distance, a silent observer of a life you can never truly be a part of. It's a perpetual feeling of being on the outside looking in, always observing, never belonging. Public appearances and outings are rare, fleeting glimpses of the world beyond your patron's estate, and they are never for your own enjoyment or freedom. When you do accompany your patron outside the household, you are not a companion. You are a silent appendage, an extension of his status, moving through the bustling streets of ancient Greece with a quiet purpose, always a step or two behind. It's like being part of a parade, but you're the invisible person carrying the banner. You might be part of a small retinue, perhaps carrying your patron's cloak, a small scroll, or even a perfumed oil flask. Your attire, simple and unassuming, ensures you blend into the background of other servants. You walk with your eyes downcast, observing but not staring, listening but not engaging. The vibrant chaos of the Agorotha marketplace, with its shouts of vendors, the murmur of philosophers debating, the clatter of pottery, all washes over you as a sensory flood you are not permitted to truly experience. Your focus remains solely on your patron, anticipating his next move, his next command. A mainstream historical fact is that public life in ancient Greece, particularly in cities like Athens, was highly social and centered around civic spaces, temples, and gymnasia. Free citizens spent much of their day outdoors. A quirky tidbit is that public fountains were vital social hubs for water collection and gossip, especially for women and enslaved people who often performed these tasks. You might pass by one, catching glimpses of daily life, but you cannot linger. Historians still argue whether the anonymity of a large city offered some practical, if not legal, freedom to enslaved individuals who might occasionally slip away unnoticed for brief periods. For you, such a thought is a dangerous fantasy. Your role is too specific, your appearance too potentially recognizable to your patron's acquaintances. Any deviation from your assigned path, any lingering, could be immediately noticed and lead to severe repercussions. Your public presence is a performance of invisibility. These outings are also fraught with the risk of unwanted attention. While you are there to serve, your appearance, cultivated for your patron's pleasure, might catch the eye of others. This can lead to uncomfortable stares, crude remarks, or even attempts at inappropriate advances from strangers who recognize your vulnerable status. You learn to deflect such attention, to make yourself even more discreet, to project an aura of unavailability without being openly disrespectful. It's a very uncomfortable dance, where you are the reluctant performer and the audience is not always polite. Even at grand public events, like religious festivals or athletic contests, your role remains that of a background figure. You might be there to hold your patron's cushion, to fetch him refreshments, or to fan him on a hot day. You witness the spectacle, the pomp and ceremony, but always from the periphery, always serving. The cheers of the crowd, the dramatic performances, the athletic prowess, these are not for your enjoyment, but simply the backdrop against which your duties unfold. You are a silent observer in a world that is vibrant and loud, but entirely beyond your reach. The fear of being replaced is a chilling current that runs beneath the surface of your daily existence. A quiet dread that can suddenly surge to the forefront of your mind. Your position contingent entirely on your patron's preference, and your youth is inherently precarious. You are a commodity, and commodities can be exchanged, sold, or discarded when they are no longer deemed desirable or useful. It's like being a fashionable piece of furniture that knows its expiration date is approaching, but has no idea when as you age, or as new, younger individuals become available, the unspoken threat intensifies. Your value is tied to your physical appeal and your ability to fulfill specific desires, and time, as it always does, works against you. You might notice your patron's gaze lingering on a new acquisition, a fresh face among the recently purchased enslaved people. This quiet observation sends a cold shiver down your spine, a silent alarm bell ringing in your head. It's a bit like being a pop star who's just heard a new, younger artist is topping the charts, only your career depends entirely on one person's fickle tastes. A mainstream historical fact is that enslaved people were frequently bought and sold in ancient Greek markets, often with little regard for established relationships or individual welfare. Their value fluctuated based on age, skills, health, and perceived beauty. A quirky tidbit is that some older, no longer desirable concubines might be reassigned to less glamorous, more physically demanding tasks within the household, such as working in the fields or assisting in the kitchens, effectively demoted. This wasn't a promotion. It was a slow fade into irrelevance, often harsher than a clean break. Historians still argue whether the concept of obsolescence was a conscious factor in the treatment of enslaved persons, or if masters simply acquired new slaves when needed, without much thought to the fate of the old. For you, the fear is very real. You see your body as your primary currency, and its gradual decline, or simply the arrival of someone newer, is a direct threat to your very existence. This constant pressure to remain desirable and useful is exhausting, adding another layer of anxiety to your already burdened life. You can't exactly hit the gym to stay competitive, can you? You learn to suppress any outward signs of your insecurity. You continue to perform your duties meticulously, perhaps even more so, hoping that your unwavering dedication and familiarity might outweigh the novelty of a new face. You make yourself indispensable in other ways, perhaps by mastering a particular skill or anticipating your patron's needs with even greater precision. It's a desperate attempt to cling to a position that was never truly yours to begin with. The ultimate fear isn't just reassignment. It's being sold off to an unknown fate, to a harsher master, or to a life of sheer physical labor. The idea of being separated from the familiar, however grim, household and cast into an entirely new, potentially worse, situation is a terrifying prospect. Your future is not a path you forge. It's a door that can open or close at another's whim, leading to an entirely uncertain and often bleak horizon. This ever-present threat makes every day a fragile existence, every moment a potential turning point toward an unknown, likely harsher, future. Gifts and meager possessions. These aren't the treasures of a free person, amassed through hard work or inheritance. For you, any gift from your patron is less a sign of generosity and more a demonstration of his power. A temporary loan of an item that can be recalled or taken away at his whim. You own nothing, truly. not even the simple tunic on your back. It's like being allowed to play with someone else's toys, knowing they can be snatched away at any moment. You learn to appreciate them, perhaps, but never to truly cherish them, perhaps. Your patron might bestow upon you a simple bronze ring, a small leather pouch, or a slightly better quality tunic than your standard issue. These items, while seemingly insignificant to a free person, are immensely valuable to you. They are tangible signs, however fleeting, of your patron's current favor. They might also make your life infinitesimally more comfortable or demonstrate your proximity to power within the household. But never forget, they are not yours in any true sense. A mainstream historical fact is that enslaved people generally had no legal right to own property. Any possessions they had were, technically, still the property of their master. A quirky tidbit is that some enslaved individuals, particularly those allowed to engage in limited trade, a rarity for concubines, might secretly accumulate small amounts of money or goods, hidden away in hopes of one day buying their freedom. This peculium, as it was sometimes called, was entirely at the master's discretion and could be confiscated at any time. For you, such a secret stash is likely an impossible dream, given the constant scrutiny and lack of opportunity. Historians still argue whether the giving of gifts to enslaved individuals was a genuine attempt at benevolence, or simply a calculated means of encouraging loyalty and productivity. For you, the motive is irrelevant. The precariousness of the gift is the reality. You hold on to these meager possessions, not with pride of ownership, but with a quiet understanding of their ephemeral nature. They are temporary comforts, not foundations for a future. You might find a quiet satisfaction in keeping them neat and well maintained, a small act of control in a life devoid of it. Your personal space, limited as it is, might contain these few items. A small wooden comb, perhaps, a polished stone you found on a rare outing, a piece of worn cloth that serves as a rudimentary pillow. These are not possessions that carry economic value, but they are yours in the only way you can claim them, through touch, through memory, through the silent fact of their presence in your immediate vicinity. They are anchors in a fluid, uncertain existence, however fragile. The inability to accumulate wealth, to truly own anything of value, ensures your continued dependence. There is no concept of saving for retirement, no inheritance to look forward to, no personal legacy to build. Your existence is day to day, a continuous effort to maintain your position and your meager provisions. Every gift reinforces the chain, a silken cord perhaps, but a chain nonetheless. You learn to live with very little, to find meaning not in possessions, but in the small, stolen moments of peace or the quiet knowledge that for today you are still here. Your health and medical care are entirely contingent on your patron's generosity and his pragmatic assessment of your value. You don't have the luxury of calling in sick or seeking out the best physician in Athens if you're feeling under the weather. Your well-being is simply another aspect of his property to manage, much like he would tend to a valuable horse or a productive olive tree. It's a very impersonal form of healthcare, where the patient is also the product. If you fall ill or suffer an injury, your treatment will depend on the severity of your condition and whether your patron believes you are worth the investment. For minor ailments, you might receive basic home remedies from other enslaved members of the household. Or perhaps the patron's wife might have some simple knowledge of herbs. For more serious issues, your patron might summon a physician, but only if he deems you valuable enough to warrant the expense. After all, replacing a concubine might sometimes be cheaper than a lengthy recovery and doctor's fees. It's a rather grim cost-benefiting analysis, isn't it? A mainstream historical fact is that ancient Greek medicine, while advanced for its time, still operated on principles different from modern understanding, often relying on theories of humors. An empirical observation, a quirky tidbit, is that enslaved individuals often served as assistants to physicians, gaining practical knowledge that, in rare cases, could even lead to them practicing medicine themselves, though usually for other enslaved people or poorer citizens. For you, however, your role as a concubine would likely keep you far from such educational opportunities. Historians still argue whether the apparent lack of concern for the well-being of enslaved populations contributed to higher mortality rates, or if masters had a vested interest in keeping their property healthy. For you, the truth is likely somewhere in the middle. Enough care to keep you functional, but not so much as to be a drain on resources. There's no preventative care, no regular checkups, no concern for your long-term health beyond your immediate utility. You learn to hide minor discomforts, to push through pain, lest you appear weak or worse. An economic liability. Chronic ailments, if they develop, could be a death sentence for your current role. A persistent cough, a limp, a scar that mars your appearance, any of these could diminish your appeal and lead to your being reassigned to harsher labor, or even sold off entirely. This creates an intense pressure to maintain a facade of perfect health, to conceal any physical weakness. You are constantly monitoring your own body, not out of self-care, but out of fear for your future. It's a silent, internal struggle, often more exhausting than the physical labor itself. Even basic hygiene, though enforced for your patron's benefit, is not always about your comfort. Cold baths in winter, bathing with rough cloths, these are not pleasant experiences, but you endure them because presenting a clean and appealing image is part of your unspoken contract. Your body is a tool, a possession, and its upkeep is a duty, not a personal prerogative. The fragility of your health, combined with the utter lack of agency in its care, is a pervasive and unsettling reality of your daily life. The sexual aspects of your role. This is the core of your function as a male concubine, the intimate duty that defines your unique vulnerability and dependence within the ancient Greek household. There's no sugarcoating it. Your body is not your own. You are expected to provide sexual gratification whenever and however your patron desires it. There is no concept of consent for you, no right to refuse, no negotiation. Your availability is absolute. It's a stark reality, one that strips away any illusion of personal autonomy. You learn to detach, to separate your mind from your body during these moments. It's a survival mechanism, a way to protect your inner self from the profound intrusion. You might stare at the ceiling, focus on a pattern in the mosaic floor, or mentally recite a quiet litany. Anything to distance yourself from the physical reality unfolding. This emotional dissociation becomes a grim skill, perfected through repetition, a silent sanctuary for your besieged spirit. It's like being an actor forced to perform the same play every night, even if the script is deeply uncomfortable, and you can never leave the stage. A mainstream historical fact is that pederasty, a relationship between an older man, and a younger male, the eromenos, was a recognized and often idealized aspect of ancient Greek society, particularly in pedagogical contexts. However, your role as a concubine differs significantly. While some eromenoi were free youths who could choose their relationships and were expected to eventually transition into active citizenship. Your status is one of forced subservience, lacking agency or future freedom. A quirky tidbit is that explicit depictions of sexual acts were common in Greek art, but these rarely showed the internal emotional lives of those involved, particularly the enslaved, offering little insight into your lived experience. Historians still argue whether the erased Ceraminos dynamic, even in its idealized forms, was always truly consensual for the Ereminos, or if social pressures and power imbalances played a significant role. For you, there's no ambiguity. The relationship is entirely transactional and coercive. There is no love, no respect, no genuine affection, only duty and demand. This absence of reciprocal feeling, combined with the enforced intimacy, creates a profound sense of isolation and objectification. You are a vessel, a tool, and nothing more. The specific nature of the acts is dictated by your patron's preferences. You are expected to be compliant, to anticipate his desires, and to fulfill them without question or hesitation. Your youth and physical attractiveness are your primary assets in this role, and you are acutely aware of their ephemeral nature. This places immense pressure on you to maintain your appearance, to remain desirable, even as the emotional toll of your duties weighs heavily upon you. It's a constant, silent performance, where your body is the instrument and your patron is the sole audience. This aspect of your life is rarely discussed, even among other servants. It's a private shame, a shared burden that isolates you further. You learn to carry this secret, this deeply personal violation, in silence. There is no comfort, no solace, no one to whom you can truly unburden yourself. This enforced secrecy adds to the emotional weight, turning your inner world into a heavily guarded fortress where only you are allowed to witness the true cost of your existence. The emotional toll and coping mechanisms you develop are as varied as they are essential for your survival. Living under constant scrutiny, without personal freedom or legal protection, and subjected to intimate violations, takes a profound psychological toll. You learn to build walls around your inner self, to compartmentalize your experiences, and to seek solace in the smallest, most fleeting moments of quiet. It's like living in a constant state of emotional siege, where your only defense is to retreat into yourself. One common coping mechanism is detachment. You learn to mentally step outside yourself, to view your body and your actions as if they belong to someone else. During moments of intimacy or humiliation, your mind might wander, focusing on mundane details, or constructing elaborate fantasies that transport you far away from your immediate reality. This mental escape becomes a vital refuge, a place where you can retain a semblance of control, even when your physical self is entirely at another's command. It's a bit like having a remote control for your own consciousness, allowing you to mute the unpleasant parts. A mainstream historical fact is that ancient Greek philosophy, particularly Stoicism, emphasized the control of one's inner thoughts and emotions in the face of external adversity. While you're not studying philosophy, you inadvertently embody a form of it. A quirky tidbit is that some enslaved individuals, particularly those who are literate, might find solace in reciting poetry or remembering stories, turning their minds into a library of escape. For you, perhaps simple rhymes or songs heard in childhood become a quiet mental retreat. Historians still argue whether enslaved individuals primarily coped through overt resistance, subtle sabotage, or psychological withdrawal. For you, the latter is likely the most accessible and safest option. Open defiance is often met with swift and brutal punishment, but your thoughts, your inner world, remain your own. However, believe this internal resilience, the ability to maintain a spark of self in the face of overwhelming oppression, is a testament to the human spirit's capacity for endurance. You might also develop a dry internal sense of humor, a gentle sarcasm directed only at yourself or the absurdity of your situation. It's a private joke, a way to lighten the immense burden, if only for a fleeting second. Perhaps you mock your own meticulous movements or the overly dramatic pronouncements of a guest. This quiet, unexpressed humor becomes a small act of defiance, a way to reclaim a sliver of agency in a world designed to deny you any. It's a secret smile only you can see, a small rebellion that keeps you from shattering. Sleep, when it comes, becomes a profound escape. It's the only time your body truly belongs to you, the only period where you are not on call, not performing, not serving. You might drift off quickly, utterly exhausted from the day's physical and emotional labor. Dreams, if they come, might be a mix of anxieties and fleeting wishes for freedom, for a life where you are not a possession. You cling to these moments of unconsciousness, knowing that the morning will bring a return to the same grim reality. The absence of legal rights is perhaps the most fundamental and terrifying aspect of your existence. In ancient Greece, specifically for someone in your position, you are not a legal person. You are chattel, property. This means you cannot own land, you cannot participate in legal proceedings, you cannot bring a lawsuit, and you certainly cannot marry or have legally recognized children. You are a living tool, and like any tool, your existence is entirely defined by your owner. It's a bit like being a very sophisticated, sentient hammer, but without any say in what you hit. If you are beaten or abused, you have no recourse. There is no court that will hear your plea, no magistrate who will defend you. Any protection you receive, any leniency, comes solely from your patron's personal discretion or his fear of damaging valuable property. Imagine living in a society where justice simply doesn't apply to you. It's a profoundly disempowering reality, where every interaction with a free citizen, even a casual one, is a reminder of your utter vulnerability, a mainstream historical fact is that enslaved people in ancient Greece were often subjected to torture if they were called upon to give testimony in court, as it was believed they would not tell the truth unless compelled by pain. This horrific practice underscores their complete lack of legal standing. A quirky tidbit is that while free citizens had a range of legal contracts for everything from land sales to loans, you, as an enslaved individual, could not enter into any binding agreement yourself. Any transaction involving you would be conducted by your patron. Historians still argue whether the theoretical right of a master to kill his slave, even if rarely exercised, fundamentally shaped the psychology of enslaved populations. For you, the sheer power differential is enough. The knowledge that your life is entirely in the hands of another, without any external checks or balances, is a constant, low hum of fear. There is no concept of due process for you, no presumption of innocence. Your patron's word is law. This legal vacuum extends to every aspect of your life. If you have children, they too are automatically enslaved and belong to your patron. There is no legal recognition of family bonds for enslaved individuals. Your relationships, however deeply felt, carry no legal weight. This means a child could be sold away from you at any moment, and you would have no right to object, no legal claim to their upbringing. It's a brutal reality that underscores your status as less than human in the eyes of the law. Even the concept of escaping carries immense legal risk. If caught, you would face severe punishment, likely branding, and then return to your master. There's no asylum, no safe harbor in the eyes of the law. Your identity is permanently tied to your enslaved status. This complete absence of legal protection means you exist in a state of perpetual jeopardy, always one step away from even greater hardship, with absolutely no one to turn to for justice or relief. Your physical appearance, in your role as a male concubine, is not merely a matter of natural endowment. It is a meticulously managed asset, a significant part of your value to your patron. You are, in essence, a living sculpture, designed to appeal to his aesthetic sensibilities. This means that while free men might cultivate a rugged, athletic look or an intellectual, philosophical air, your beauty is curated for a very specific purpose. It's like being a show dog, but instead of ribbons, you get two. Stay in the house. The ancient Greeks had distinct ideals of male beauty, often emphasizing youthful, athletic builds, smooth skin, and harmonious proportions. For you, maintaining this ideal is paramount. This might involve a strict diet, enforced exercise, and regular grooming. Perhaps your patron prefers you clean-shaven, requiring you to painstakingly remove any facial hair, or maybe he appreciates a specific hairstyle, demanding that you keep your hair neatly cut and oiled. These aren't personal grooming choices. They are requirements for maintaining your desirability. A mainstream historical fact is that physical beauty was highly valued in ancient Greek culture, often associated with concepts of kallikrateia, the ideal of noble and good character combined with physical excellence. A quirky tidbit is that young men often trained nude in the gymnasium, fostering an appreciation for the male form, though this was for free citizens and vastly different from your forced presentation. For you, the focus on your body is not about cultivating virtue, but about maintaining market value. Historians still argue whether the emphasis on male beauty in Greek art and literature reflected a universal societal ideal, or was primarily a feature of the aristocratic elite. For you, it's a very practical reality. Your appearance is a key determinant of your worth and, by extension, your treatment. This places an immense pressure on you to preserve your youth and attractiveness, a constant battle against the inevitable march of time. You watch yourself in reflective surfaces, a polished bronze shield, a still pool of water, searching for any sign of decline, any flaw that might diminish your patron's interest. This focus on your physical form can be deeply dehumanizing. You are reduced to your most superficial attributes, your inner world and personality becoming secondary, if not entirely irrelevant. Your worth is measured not by your intelligence or your kindness, but by the smoothness of your skin, the strength of your physique, or the appeal of your features. It's a very shallow metric, and one that leaves little room for genuine self-worth beyond external validation. Even your gestures and movements are likely refined to enhance your appeal. You learn to carry yourself with a certain grace, to move silently and elegantly, almost like a dancer. Every aspect of your physical presence is molded to create a pleasing image for your patron. It's an exhausting performance, a constant awareness of your body as an object of desire rather than a vessel for your own being. And unlike a beautiful statue, you can't just stand there, you have to do things. A lot of things. The master's varying moods are like a relentless tide, ebbing and flowing, sometimes calm, sometimes turbulent, and you are constantly adrift upon them. One day he might be expansive, even jovial, perhaps engaging in a rare, fleeting moment of what almost feels like kindness. The next, he could be withdrawn, brooding, or explode in a fit of rage over the smallest perceived slight. Your ability to survive, to maintain some semblance of peace, depends entirely on your capacity to adapt, to anticipate these shifts, and to adjust your demeanor accordingly. It's like being a very sensitive barometer, but instead of predicting rain, you're predicting wrath. And you don't get to run for shelter. You learn to read the subtle cues, the way his jaw tightens, the slight narrowing of his eyes, a sudden silence in a previously lively conversation. These are your early warning signals. When you sense a storm brewing, you become even more invisible, more efficient, making yourself scarce, if possible, or moving with heightened caution. You speak even less, avoid eye contact, and focus on your tasks with meticulous precision, hoping that your quiet diligence will make you less of a target. A mainstream historical fact is that personal temperament and emotional control were highly valued virtues among free Greek citizens, though this ideal was often not matched in practice, especially by those in positions of power. A quirky tidbit is that ancient Greek medical texts, following Hippocratic principles, often linked emotional states to the balance of bodily humors, suggesting a more physiological understanding of mood swings than we might have today. For you, however, his humors are just your daily forecast for misery. Historians still argue whether the absolute power of masters over their enslaved people led to more frequent outbursts of violence, or if societal norms, however weak, still encouraged a degree of self. For you, the uncertainty is the torment. You never know when the shift will occur, what small thing might trigger it, or how severe the consequence might be. This unpredictability creates a pervasive undercurrent of anxiety, a constant state of hypervigilance that is utterly exhausting. You walk on eggshells, but the eggshells are invisible and prone to sudden, inexplicable cracks. When your patron is in a rare good mood, you might experience a brief reprieve. Perhaps he is less demanding, or offers a small, unexpected favor. These moments are fleeting, but you learn to recognize and even appreciate them, however cynical that might sound. They are the brief respites that allow you to catch your breath before the next wave hits. You might even find yourself subtly trying to maintain his good humor, offering a pleasant smile or anticipating a need just a moment faster, hoping to prolong the calm. But you know deep down that these moments are temporary. The pendulum will swing back. And so you remain guarded, never truly relaxing, never fully letting your guard down. Your life is a constant performance of placid subservience, a silent dance around the unpredictable and absolute power of your master. It's a heavy burden, living your life in anticipation of another's ever-changing emotional landscape. Opportunities for advancement for someone in your position are incredibly scarce, almost mythical. In a society rigidly structured by birth and status, your role as an enslaved male concubine places you firmly at the bottom of the ladder, with very few, if any, rungs above you. The concept of climbing the corporate ladder simply doesn't apply when the ladder is designed to keep you firmly in place, or even push you off entirely. You're not looking for a promotion. You're hoping to avoid a demotion to manual labor, while some highly skilled enslaved individuals, like artisans or scribes, might occasionally earn enough peculium small savings to purchase their freedom. Your specific role rarely offers such opportunities. Your value is in your direct service and intimate availability, not in a marketable trade that could generate independent income. There's no apprenticeship program, no path to becoming a master craftsman. Your skill set, in this context, is primarily interpersonal and personal, not economically transferable. It's a very specialized niche, and unfortunately, it doesn't come with a pension plan. A mainstream historical fact is that manumission, the act of freeing a slave, did occur in ancient Greece, though it was relatively uncommon and usually required specific conditions, often involving payment to the master. A quirky tidbit is that some masters, particularly in their wills, might free certain slaves as a gesture of piety or as a reward for long and faithful service, though this was often for older, less productive slaves or those with specific household management skills. Your youth and primary role might actually work against such a benevolent gesture. Historians still argue whether the possibility of manumission served as an incentive for enslaved people to be more compliant and productive, or if it was simply a tool for masters to manage their workforce. For you, the prospect of freedom seems incredibly distant, a faint glimmer on a far-off horizon. It's not something you actively work towards with a clear path, but rather a desperate hope, a quiet fantasy. Your daily life is too consumed by the immediate demands of survival and service to plot an elaborate escape or saving scheme. Any advancement you might experience would be purely internal to the household. Perhaps your patron grows fonder of you, leading to slightly better food, softer blankets, or a temporary reprieve from certain duties. These are small comforts, not true improvements in status. They are tokens of favor, subject to immediate withdrawal, not a permanent change in your fundamental condition. It's like getting a slightly bigger cage, but it's still a cage. The most you can realistically hope for is to maintain your current, albeit difficult, position for as long as possible, avoiding the fate of being sold off to a harsher master, or reassigned to back-breaking labor. Your career path is less about ascending to new heights and more about clinging to the slippery ledge you're already on. This lack of upward mobility, this sense of being permanently trapped, adds a profound layer of despair to your existence. There's no light at the end of the tunnel, just more tunnel. The dreams of escape are, for you, a constant, flickering ember in the deep recesses of your mind. They are born of desperation and fueled by the quiet yearning for autonomy, for a life where your body and your time are truly your own. These aren't grand, elaborate plans, but rather fleeting fantasies that offer momentary solace from the suffocating reality of your existence. It's like imagining yourself flying, even though you're perfectly aware you're stuck in a very sturdy cage. You might find yourself, in the quiet moments before sleep or during a monotonous task, picturing a different life. Perhaps you imagine yourself in a distant city, blending anonymously into the crowd, earning your own meager living. Or perhaps you envision a life in the countryside, working the land, feeling the sun on your back and the earth beneath your feet, truly free. These are not actionable plans, but mental refuges, brief vacations for your spirit. They are your secret rebellion, your unexpressed defiance against the chains that bind you. A mainstream historical fact is that enslaved people did, on occasion, attempt to escape in ancient Greece, though the success rate was low due to pervasive societal control and the severe penalties for those caught. A quirky tidbit is that some masters would employ slave catchers, specialized individuals who would track down and return runaways, often for a fee. The existence of these professionals underscores the difficulty of successful escape. It's like trying to run from a very determined bloodhound. But the bloodhound also has a warrant. Historians still argue whether the prevalence of escape attempts indicates a widespread spirit of resistance among enslaved populations, or, if it was, more a desperate act by individuals facing extreme hardship. For you, the internal debate is academic. The risk is immense, the chances of success slim, and the consequences of failure horrific. This reality usually keeps your dreams firmly in the realm of fantasy, a quiet hope rather than a concrete plan. The mere thought of escape is terrifying, but the thought of not escaping is even more so sometimes. A rumor might filter through the household a tale of an enslaved person who successfully fled and was never found. These stories, often embellished in the telling, become whispered legends, tiny sparks of hope that briefly ignite the darkness. You cling to them, even if you know deep down they are likely exaggerated or unique exceptions. They are a testament to the possibility, however remote, of a life beyond bondage. But the crushing weight of reality always returns. The lack of resources, the absence of connections outside the household, the omnipresent fear of recapture. These factors bind you more effectively than any physical chain. Your escape remains largely internal, a mental journey into a world where you are free, whole, and unharmed. You learn to live within these dual realities, the harsh confines of your daily life, and the expansive, beautiful landscape of your unspoken dreams. These dreams are your most precious possession, precisely because they can never be taken from you. Old age and eventual fate, these are the grim companions of your thoughts, particularly as your youth, which is your primary asset, inevitably begins to fade. What happens when your physical beauty wanes, when your body is no longer as spry or as pleasing to your patron? Your value, already precarious, diminishes significantly. This grim progression hangs over you, a constant, unspoken reminder that your current position is temporary, and what comes after is likely far worse. It's like being a fruit, knowing your freshness has a definite shelf life, and after that, it's off to the compost heap, as wrinkles begin to etch around your eyes, or a new ache settles into your joints. You observe yourself with a chilling detachment. Each sign of aging is a warning, a subtle herald of your impending obsolescence. Your patron, ever attuned to your value, might notice too, his gaze perhaps lingering less, his demands shifting. The fear of being replaced, which has always been present, now takes on a new, more urgent dimension. You're not just worried about a new face. You're worried about the inevitable decay of your own. A mainstream historical fact is that enslaved people who were no longer productive due to age, illness, or injury were often a burden to their masters and might be sold, abandoned, or assigned to the most menial and undesirable tasks. A quirky tidbit is that some older enslaved individuals might gain a modicum of respect within the household if they had served faithfully for many years and possessed unique knowledge, perhaps becoming trusted overseers or advisors. However, for a concubine, this path is rarely open, as your value is rooted in a different kind of service. Historians still argue whether the concept of retirement for enslaved people existed in any meaningful sense, or if their lives simply continued in a state of diminished capacity until death. For you, the prospect of a dignified old age seems impossible. You envision yourself relegated to the most grueling, least desirable labor, perhaps working in the fields or in the grimy corners of the kitchens, stripped of any comfort or proximity to the patron's presence. The softness of your former life would be a distant memory, replaced by harsh reality. Even abandonment is a distinct possibility. If you become too much of a burden, too expensive to maintain, or simply no longer useful, your patron might simply cast you out. Imagine being old, sick, and alone, with no resources, no family, and no legal protection. Wandering the streets of a city that once confined you but now utterly disregards you. It's a terrifying prospect, one that underscores the absolute vulnerability of your life. The alternative, of course, is death within the patron's household, perhaps from illness or the cumulative toll of your life. While grim, it might offer a strange comfort. At least your suffering would end. But even in death, you are still property. Your body might be disposed of without ceremony, unmourned and unremembered, save for a fleeting thought from your patron about the cost of replacing you. Your future, in old age, is a landscape of profound uncertainty, all leading to an ignominious end. Comparing your experience to that of female concubines in ancient Greece reveals both stark similarities and subtle, yet crucial, differences. While the practice of concubinage for both sexes shared the common thread of exploitation and a profound lack of freedom, the specific societal expectations and legal nuances often diverged, creating unique hardships for each. It's like comparing two different kinds of very uncomfortable shoes, both pinch, but in slightly different places. And unfortunately, neither comes with arch support, like you. Female concubines were typically enslaved, lacked legal rights, and were economically dependent on their patrons. Their bodies were also considered property, used for sexual gratification and the production of children who would also be enslaved. They too faced the constant fear of being sold, abused, or discarded. The fundamental vulnerability and dehumanization were shared experiences, regardless of gender. They, like you, were objects, not citizens. A mainstream historical fact is that female concubines, often called palakai, were a recognized, though low status, part of many Greek households, serving alongside the legitimate wife. A quirky tidbit is that while free women were largely confined to the gynekon women's quarters and had limited public roles, some high-status courtesans, hetairai, had more freedom and education, even participating in symposia, a privilege almost never afforded to male concubines in a similar capacity. This highlights a subtle divergence in societal expectations and roles. Historians still argue whether the hetairai, who were sometimes foreigners and highly educated, represented a true alternative form of female agency in ancient Greece, or if they too were ultimately constrained by patriarchal structures. For you, this distinction is poignant. While a female concubine might face confinement, your role as a male concubine often places you more directly in the patron's personal space, subject to his immediate whims without the relative seclusion that might protect a female concubine within the gynekon. Your exposure is often greater. Furthermore, the societal stigma attached to your role as a male concubine could be particularly harsh. While male and male sexual relationships were not universally condemned, your specific role as a passive, subservient partner was often viewed as undignified for a free Greek man. To be in your position meant forfeiting any chance of aspiring to the ideals of active citizenship, military service, or head of household status. For female concubines, their primary societal role was domestic, and while their status was low, it aligned, however imperfectly, with the broader societal expectations for women. For you, your role actively undermined traditional male ideals. Female concubines, particularly if they bore children, might, in rare cases, gain a modicum of stability through their offspring, as the children could eventually be valued for labor or continuation of the household. For you, the production of children is less likely to alter your status or secure your future in the same way. Your value remains tied to your person, not your progeny. So, while both male and female concubines occupied unenviable positions, the specific avenues of hope, however slim, and the societal perceptions of their roles did possess distinct nuances. The rare path to freedom or manumission for someone in your position is less a well-trodden road and more a faint, almost invisible trail through a dense, thorny wilderness. It exists, yes, as a theoretical possibility, but the actual journey is fraught with immense difficulty, requiring extraordinary circumstances, an immense stroke of luck, or an incredibly benevolent and often very dead patron. It's like finding a single four-leaf clover in an entire field of regular ones. But the clover then has to pay its way out of the field. Most frequently, manumission involved a payment to the master, either by the enslaved person themselves, if they had managed to accumulate peculium, which is unlikely for you, or by a third party. Imagine trying to save enough money for your freedom when every penny you might earn, every skill you possess, belongs to your patron. It's a classic catch-22 situation, isn't it? You need money to be free, but you can't earn money because you're not free. A mainstream historical fact is that manumission could also occur through a master's will, often upon his death, as a reward for long service, or as an act of piety. A quirky tidbit is that manumission was sometimes formalized through a symbolic sale to a god, typically at a temple, with the god then owning the freed person but granting them autonomy. This provided a religious sanction that made the freedom harder to revoke. For you, clinging to the hope that your patron might suddenly become a devout follower of, say, the god of free concubines, is probably not a very reliable retirement plan. Historians still argue whether masters freed slaves primarily out of genuine kindness, as a way to dispose of unproductive labor, or to gain social prestige by demonstrating their generosity. For you, the motive is irrelevant. The action is all that matters. But even if your patron were inclined to free you, the practicalities are daunting. What would you do? Where would you go? You have no family network to fall back on, no property, no established trade, and likely no skills beyond personal service. Freedom without support can be just another form of destitution. Sometimes, a master might free an enslaved person for public service, or as a testament to exceptional loyalty during a crisis. But again, these are rare exceptions, often involving individuals in positions of significant trust or skill. Your intimate role, while vital to your patron, doesn't translate into the kind of public service that might earn you such a reward. You are too much of a private commodity to be publicly celebrated, so, while the concept of freedom exists, for you, it remains largely a distant dream, an aspiration rather than a realistic goal. You might hear whispers of others who have achieved it, but these tales often sound like fables, almost too good to be true. The vast majority of enslaved individuals, particularly those in your vulnerable position, lived and died in bondage, their hopes of liberty remaining just that, hopes. The path to freedom is so narrow, so overgrown with obstacles, that most simply cannot even begin the journey. The societal indifference to your existence is a pervasive, chilling reality that wraps around you like a shroud. In ancient Greece, particularly in a city focused on its free citizens, democratic ideals, and philosophical discourse, the lives of enslaved people especially those in less visible or less respectable roles like yours, simply weren't a topic of public concern. You exist in the shadows, unacknowledged, uncounted, and largely uncared for by the broader society. It's like being a very quiet background extra in a very loud play, and no one in the audience even knows you're there. When free citizens discuss laws, politics, or the well-being of the polis, you are not included in their calculations. Their world operates on principles of citizenship and freedom that deliberately exclude you. Your suffering, your aspirations, your very humanity are simply not part of the public consciousness. You are a silent statistic, a hidden cog in the societal machine, and your experiences are dismissed as part of the natural order of things. A mainstream historical fact is that despite philosophical debates on justice and human nature, the institution of slavery was rarely challenged fundamentally in ancient Greek society. It was accepted as a given. A quirky tidbit is that while free citizens might participate in elaborate public funerals and mourning rituals for their loved ones, the deaths of enslaved individuals were often unceremonious, sometimes not even formally recorded. Your life, and indeed your death, passes largely without public notice. Historians still argue whether the widespread acceptance of slavery was a moral failing of Greek society, or if it was simply a reflection of the economic and social realities of the time. For you, the intellectual debate is cold comfort. The reality is that your existence is entirely dispensable in the eyes of the many. You are a means to an end, a convenience for the privileged, and nothing more. This profound indifference is arguably as dehumanizing as any direct act of cruelty, because it negates your very personhood. You observe the bustling life around you, citizens going about their day, engaging in trade, participating in religious festivals, celebrating triumphs. You are there, physically present, but socially invisible. No one makes eye contact. No one acknowledges your presence beyond a functional command. You are part of the scenery, a fleeting shadow, and this lack of recognition reinforces your isolation. It's like screaming underwater. You make noise, but no one hears you. Even the public spaces, the very fabric of the city, are designed for the free. The agora is for citizens to debate. The temples are for citizens to worship. The gymnasia are for citizens to train. You move through these spaces as an alien, an interloper, always aware that you do not belong, that your presence is tolerated only as long as you serve a master who does belong. This societal disregard, this quiet erasure of your experience, is a heavy burden, a constant reminder of your profound insignificance in the grand scheme of things. Your final reflections on your life as a male concubine in ancient Greece are not of grandeur or legacy, but of endurance, quiet survival, and the profound weight of unchosen circumstances. As you near the end of your days, perhaps reassigned to a more menial task, or simply fading into the background of a bustling household, you carry the indelible imprints of a life lived without agency, without true freedom, and often without dignity. It's a quiet legacy, etched not in stone, but in the very fabric of your being. You might look back and see a tapestry woven with moments of subtle beauty. The way the sunlight fell through a specific courtyard arch, the scent of a particular flower in the patron's garden, a fleeting moment of connection with a fellow servant. But these moments are often overshadowed by the pervasive grey of dependence, the ever-present threat of punishment, and the constant erosion of your selfhood. Your memories are not of achievements, but of adaptations, of the countless ways you learned to bend without breaking. A mainstream historical fact is that detailed personal narratives of enslaved people from ancient Greece are exceedingly rare, making your specific experiences largely lost to history, except as inferred from legal documents or philosophical texts. A quirky tidbit is that while many Greeks believed in an afterlife, the concept of a good or bad afterlife was often tied to one's actions and status in life, leaving little comfort for those whose lives were so constrained. For you, perhaps, the greatest comfort lies in the impending quietude of oblivion. Historians still argue whether the historical silence surrounding the lives of enslaved individuals reflects a deliberate suppression of their stories, or simply a lack of record-keeping by those in power who did not deem such lives worthy of chronicle. For you, the answer is irrelevant. Your story, your suffering, your quiet resistance will likely remain unheard by the grand narratives of history. You are a footnote, if that, in the annals of a civilization that valued freedom above all else, yet built its foundations upon your bondage. Your final thoughts might drift to the paradox of your existence, living in a society celebrated for its philosophical insights, its art, its democratic ideals, yet being denied the most basic human rights. You were a living contradiction, a silent testament to the darker undercurrents of a seemingly enlightened age. The beauty of the temples, the wisdom of the philosophers, the grandeur of the amphitheaters, all existed alongside your quiet suffering, a stark contrast that defined your entire world. As the light fades, and your breath grows shallow, you might finally find a peace that was denied to you in life. A true, unburdened freedom of spirit that rises above the chains, the expectations, the constant demands. You are no longer property, no longer subservient, no longer an object of desire or contempt. You are simply gone. And in that quiet finality, there is, perhaps, a peculiar kind of liberation. Now, as the ancient world recedes into the soft mists of time, let the silence gather around you. The echoes of those quiet lives, the unspoken burdens and fleeting hopes, now fade into the tranquil darkness. Allow the stillness to deepen, washing over you like a calm, cool tide. There are no more duties, no more demands, only the profound peace of knowing that this journey through history is complete. Feel the gentle lull of the night, a soothing embrace after our quiet contemplation. Let your mind drift, softened by the quiet hum of the world settling down. There's nothing left to do, nowhere else to be. Just rest, sweet dreams.